Hello readers. Please, love, like, comment, share, follow, and subscribe. Thank you. CEO Daddy. Chapter 1297. This pregnant woman cannot be belittled. In this cold winter night, it gave her a sense of security. When she stopped and wanted to retreat, Joshua couldn't help but lower his head and ask her in a low voice, "You're not thinking of escaping again, are you? Take my child with you. Where else can you escape to other than staying by my side?" Humor and dangerous words made Elizabeth nervous. She immediately looked at him. "I won't run anymore." "Then why don't you look up? Are you going to keep your head down and not look at anyone else?" the man asked with a chuckle. Elizabeth seemed to have awoken from a dream, and only now did she realize how cowardly she had been as she walked over. Elizabeth sighed in her heart. She was no longer only representing her own image, she was also protecting Joshua's image. She should be a bit more generous. Only then did Elizabeth raise her head and follow Joshua. A lot of people squeezed over to greet Joshua and asked about his relationship with her. Joshua directly introduced her as his wife, and beside Elizabeth's ears rang the clear laughter of a man as well as his gentle words. Just as Elizabeth was smiling as she faced the guests, suddenly, her eyes swept around and felt a blade piercing towards her. Instinctively, she raised her leg and kicked the criminal away. "Bitch, you ruined my plans." When that man wanted to make use of his toast, Joshua wasn't prepared to assassinate him, but he didn't expect the woman beside him to have such keen reactions. He had just taken out a knife from his pocket, but she ruthlessly kicked him away. Joshua's mind shook. He saw that after the man crawled up from the ground, he stabbed towards him again. Before Joshua could react, he felt the cup of wine in his hands being snatched away by a small hand. In the next second, she used the power of her hand to throw the cup of wine towards the man's face and eyes. "Are my eyes?" The man failed once again. Not only that, the heat from the wine and the sharpness of the glass caused his eyes to turn blood red in an instant. There was no chance for him to hurt Joshua again. Everyone present was shocked. They never thought that someone would dare to kill Joshua, and never thought that the lady beside him was so powerful. She looked weak, and was even pregnant, so much so that she would not hesitate to teach him a lesson. Elizabeth had reacted instinctively just now. At this moment, when she saw that the bad guy's eyes were injured by her, she suddenly felt a little embarrassed. Did everyone feel that she was too violent? However, when she thought about how dangerous the man beside her was, she couldn't care less about her identity as a pregnant woman. Her more than 10 years of training hadn't been in vain. Immediately, guards rushed over to take control of the situation. Joshua was startled, but was even more worried about the lady by his side, and anxiously asked, "Eliza, are you all right? Luckily you reacted quickly, or else I'm afraid the person who was injured right now would be me." "I'm fine. I won't let you get hurt." Elizabeth's face became slightly embarrassed. The female celebrities who looked down on Elizabeth earlier were so frightened that their faces turned pale. Soon after, they all had a trace of realization in their hearts. They liked that man who was as dazzling as the sun, but it was a pity that they couldn't beat the pregnant woman beside him. "What's wrong? What's wrong? What happened?" Kathy pulled Christina and ran over and saw that everyone was panicking. "Eliza, are you all right?" The first thing Kathy did was care about pregnant woman. "I'm fine. Someone was trying to hurt Joshua just now, but he was taken away." Elizabeth shook her head and said with a smile, "Oh my God, Joshua, what grudge do you have with the other side to actually send someone to assassinate you?" Kathy was so frightened that her beautiful face turned white. Christina immediately tugged her sleeve softly, telling her not to ask such a question in public. Kathy immediately understood and said angrily, "This is too reckless." Joshua took the microphone that the host by the side handed to him, and said coldly, "Looks like someone took the chance to harm me during today's banquet. The person behind this has already been taken away, and I believe that the person behind this is also here to watch the show. Either you stand out and admit your crime or wait for the police to interrogate you." Just as Joshua finished speaking, the entire place turned dead silent. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They were stunned by the sudden danger. Just then, a few middle-aged men put down the wine glasses in their hands and stood in the center area with their hands behind their backs. One of them kneeled down first, feeling guilty and frightened. "Joshua, I'm sorry. It was all because of the benefits that fooled us that we found that person to kill you. Please let us go. We know we were wrong." The rest of the group of people were also frightened to the point that their legs went limp. After knowing that the matter had been exposed, the results would definitely be disastrous. Joshua looked at his subordinates that he had trusted before, and let out a cold laugh. "Why you?" Joshua's handsome face was filled with anger. When he had just established his company, these few people were hired by him with high salaries. To Joshua, they were like his instructors, teaching him step by step until he reached today's state. "Joshua, I'm sorry, we have nothing to say." The men hung their heads. "I know why you want to kill me. Because I've touched your interests before. Besides the compensation and benefits of the company, you were able to earn tens of millions of dollars every year. But now, because of my reforms, you've lost all of these benefits, so you hate me. But don't forget, I gave you a chance, a platform, and you're the ones who can make a profit. You're too greedy. So don't think that I don't know what you're doing behind my backs." Joshua coldly ridiculed them, staring at them with even more emotionless eyes. The middle-aged men's faces turned pale. It was too late for regret. Originally, it was a lively and happy night, but because of this killing intent, it ended. In the empty banquet hall, Joshua sat on a chair, raising his head to look at the exquisite and beautiful stage. The lights around him were still dazzling, but he had completely disappeared. Elizabeth walked to his side, gently placed her hand on his shoulder and whispered with concern, "Are you sad?" Sometimes, the human heart is truly terrifying. During a meeting at noon, they would even smile at me, but at night, they would send people to kill me. Joshua started to doubt life. Maybe this was the only way for him to experience maturity. Life was originally cruel, but some people were born with a pair of kind eyes, who only love to look at beautiful things. Don't think too much into it. They should be regretting it. Elizabeth could tell that those men were truly shocked. She never thought that the consequences would be so severe. Does this mean that every decision that life makes must not be made to regret? Joshua stood up. His tall body slowly approached her. "Eliza, you saved my life today. Other than marrying you, I can't think of any other way to repay you. Will you regret making this decision?" Elizabeth learned it now, and a pair of gentle eyes focused on him. Joshua used his actions to prove that he would not regret anything. Searing hot lips attack. Elizabeth's body lightly swayed, and in the next second, She was gently pulled into the man's embrace. The kiss made him unable to breathe, but Elizabeth rejoiced. Perhaps the pain and suffering he had suffered during his training had come for this moment to save his life. Alice, looks like I'll have to be a good person in the future. Otherwise, if I get taught a lesson by you, I won't be able to get out of bed for half a month in 10 days. You laugh at me. Sure enough, what Elizabeth was worried about still happened. Do men not like tigers who show off their strength? Of course not. I like the way you beat people. It's very cool and also very beautiful. Joshua could still imagine the way she quickly snatched the cup and threw it at him. Is that what you said? If you get beaten by me in the future, you are not allowed to speak ill of me. Elizabeth was immediately pleased with herself. Chapter 1298. Offended him? When the sun rose in the cold winter, Alvina Miller opened the window and saw the sun shining down on the white snow. Her mood immediately lifted. Now that the weather had become cold, someone was helping to bring in breakfast. Alvina Miller truly felt that Joseph Grant seemed strict and grave, but he understood how to be gentle and considerate in a meticulous manner, and believed that many men would not necessarily pay attention to a woman's details. However, Joseph Grant did not say anything, and had done enough. Miss Miller, Mr. Grant asked me to send something over to you this morning. I placed it on the tea table. Go take a look yourself, the aunt said with a smile. Well, thank you. Alvina Miller immediately grabbed a piece of bread and ran into the living room to have a look. It was actually delicately wrapped, and even had a blue ribbon tied with a butterfly knot. This is really hard for him. Alvina Miller burst out laughing, but she still wanted to know what was inside. Opening the package, a slip of paper suddenly dropped out. It was Joseph Grant's handwriting. His handwriting was vigorous and forceful, and his handwriting looked perfect, just like his entire demeanor. Alvina Miller boringly admired his character, then saw the content of his writing. I promised to give you a present. I hope you like it. Alvina Miller blinked her beautiful eyes. Right? She seemed to have mentioned this request to Joseph Grant before, but she had forgotten about it. Even Joseph Grant still remembered it. Well, his memory was better than hers, so if there were any big matters in the future, he would remember them. Alvina Miller picked up the exquisite little purple box, his heart thumping. This kind of box should normally contain rings, right? Haha, you're indeed a coquettish man. You don't dare to confess to me in front of me, yet you want to confess to me in secret. Alvina Miller was extremely happy in her heart, and could not wait to open it. However, she discovered that the things inside were different from what she had imagined. Why is it a brooch? Holy shit. Alvina Miller's face was in a mess. It was actually a rose-shaped brooch, filled with gems. It was extremely exquisite. Joseph Grant, just you wait. There will be a day when I will let you give me the ring. After a moment of joy, Alvina Miller became depressed, but still put the rose-shaped brooch onto her suits. Since their overalls were black and had nothing to show for it, the executive office had no special rules not to wear brooches, a small decorative object. Alvina Miller was in a good mood. After eating breakfast, he drove to work. Just as she entered the office, she saw Kelly walking quickly towards her. Alvina Miller's face tensed up. She wanted to pretend that he did not see her. Alvina. Kelly called out her name. Alvina Miller could only smile hypocritically, and turned to look at her and asked, "Kelly, what's the matter? Are you coming here to retrieve your documents?" "No, I just have something that I want your help," Kelly said anxiously. "Oh, what is it?" Alvina Miller replied, but in her heart, she was filled with various thoughts. "Have you heard that Olivia was hired over for a job? Do you think the Mr. Vice President hired her here?" Kelly asked her in a low voice, her face filled with anger. Alvina Miller almost lost her temper. She felt that Kelly really cared too much about Joseph Grant. This was not a good thing at all. "Kelly, I'm not too sure either. Even if you ask me, I don't know." Alvina Miller looked at her with a difficult expression. "Your boyfriend isn't Lieutenant Hilton. You only need to ask him." "Alvina, please help me. I'm very scared." Kelly tugged her arm, with her face full of pleading. Alvina Miller was the one who was going crazy. Could she say that she was more afraid? "Kelly, regarding Joseph Grant in the future. Cough. About Mr. Vice President. Don't ask me any more. I really want to work here properly. You have to know, it's illegal to ask about Mr. Vice President's information." Alvina Miller accidentally leaked it, scaring her so much that she quickly corrected herself. Kelly was not stupid. She knew that Alvina Miller did not want to help her, so she could only let go of her hand with a look of disappointment on her face. "Alvina, you aren't even my friend if you aren't even going to help with this small favor." Alvina Miller wanted to say something, but Kelly didn't want to hear it any longer, so she turned around and left. Alvina Miller shrugged her shoulders helplessly. "All right, it's fine if they wouldn't be friends any longer." On the other hand, angrily thought, if Alvina Miller was not willing to help her, Alvina Miller definitely did not want her to be with Mr. Vice President. Women are all the same. She just did not want her friends to live a better life than herself, isn't it? Alvina Miller's boyfriend was Lieutenant Hilton. If she was really liked by Mr. Vice President, she would think that her boyfriend was inferior to hers. Around 3 p.m. in the afternoon, Alvina Miller was holding onto a pile of information, and a male colleague took the initiative to come over to help her. The two of them chatted and laughed, and the atmosphere was pretty good. Only, Alvina Miller did not realize that while she was working with the male colleagues, a pair of tall and slender figures were walking over slowly from outside the window. If he was not busy, Joseph Grant would usually go to the library next door to look at information. Today was the first time he passed by the window where Alvina Miller worked. His eyes swept over her from afar, thinking that he could see her secretly winking at him or greeting him with a smile. Obviously, the greater the hope, the more loss there would be. What he saw was that the woman was bent over and was very close to a male colleague. The two of them seemed to be talking and working at the same time. Joseph Grant felt that the time he came was not right, or was this the way this woman worked? Lieutenant Hilton followed by the side and naturally saw that Alvina Miller and another male colleague were working together at the window. He was startled. "Mr. Grant, do you want to?" "No." With a cold and handsome face, he left in large strides. Alvina Miller was completely unaware that she had offended the noble Mr. Vice President again. After she finished archiving the information, she stretched her neck out and looked outside, and then muttered, "Didn't you say that you would have time to come over to read in the afternoon? It's been a few days and I haven't even seen a shadow. You must be lying to me." Just as Alvina Miller was feeling depressed, she suddenly received a message. She took a look at it, and it seemed to be a private number of the Lieutenant Hilton. "Miss Miller, please come to the library." Alvina Miller's mind shook, and a kind of inexplicable happiness filled his chest, causing her to become energetic. Her job was just to go to the archive room, and sometimes she would need to go to the library to help out with a few things. At this point, Alvina Miller felt that she should be able to go for a stroll in the library with confidence. She greeted the people beside her, got up, and quickly walked towards the library. As soon as she entered the library, she looked around with her beautiful eyes. Suddenly, she saw Lieutenant Hilton sitting on one of the seats, and then, he pointed her in another direction. Alvina Miller's breath immediately became sluggish, as she felt a sense of nervousness, as if she was trying to steal someone's life. She slowed her steps and walked to the last bookshelf. She saw a man with a book in his hand leaning against the bookshelf as he read earnestly in the long passageway. So handsome. When she was in university in the past, there were also some boys who pretended to be leaning in the library with a cup of wine. The gloomy and deep expression on their faces was precisely for the sake of attracting the attention of female students. But at this moment, she felt that Joseph Grant was really reading a book, and not even the slightest bit fake. "Joseph," she walked over with a smile and greeted him. Only then did Joseph Grant turn his gaze from his hands to her face. Seeing her smiling face, he actually closed the book and threw a cup of books into her arms. Alvina Miller instinctively caught it, turned around and went to get the other books. "I knew you liked reading about politics." Alvina Miller looked down and immediately said with a smile, but soon, the number of books in her hands increased at a speed visible to the naked eye. So heavy. Alvina Miller did not expect Joseph Grant to call her over not to have a relationship with her, but to use her as an errand girl. "Hold on tight, don't drop it." The man had even ruthlessly thrown a sentence at her. Chapter 1299. He would never be able to beat her. Alvina Miller tried her best to support the weight of the book with her two thin arms. Her beautiful eyes opened wide in disbelief as she looked at Joseph Grant, who was still reaching out to grab the books. The atmosphere was serious. Alvina Miller suddenly felt wronged. At the same time, resentment arose involuntarily. She directly asked in a loud voice, "Joseph Grant, are you mistreating me?" Hearing this, the man's hand that was holding the book paused, and his eyes sunk. In the end, he didn't continue to place the book in her embrace. "You beat me up before you even get married. If we get married in the future, wouldn't I die from grievance?" Alvina Miller looked pitiful, her face serious, as if Joseph Grant had really done something terrible. The man didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. Who had beaten who? Alvina Miller tried really hard to squeeze out 2 tears to denounce him for his crimes, but she discovered that she couldn't even cry. It was also at this moment that the man's tense body suddenly turned around, causing her to jump in fright. The book in her arms almost fell off. She instinctively adjusted her hand gestures, allowing the book to remain in place. "Joseph Grant, I have already reminded you, if you are making fun of me, I will." "So what? Go and flirt with other men." Joseph Grant took a step forward with his long legs, forcing her into a corner. His large body covered her completely, as well as the dozens of books in her arms. "My arms are about to break." Both of Alvina Miller's hands were straining, her eyes were slightly red, and her lips were tightly clenched. The man snorted lightly. He reached out his hand and took away a few books, then casually placed them on a shelf at the side. He continued to say, "Alvina Miller, I think there are quite a few young and handsome men in this new department and you are very popular." Alvina Miller's beautiful eyes immediately widened. Her clever brain quickly went through a circle, and she instantly understood the relationship between the two. Haha, what kind of jealousy does Mr. Vice President have? It's really sour. Alvina Miller immediately put on a proud attitude, her smiling eyes staring straight at the man, as if she knew of an important matter. "I'm not joking with you. You'd better. I understand. I understand. I understand. I am a newcomer. I can't handle many things well. Someone came over to give me pointers and help me out a little. I can't be thankful to them. I have to point at their face and say, 'Stay away from me.' Is this the result that you want?" Alvina Miller tilted her face. Her eyes and tail slanted towards the man. Her playful expression almost made the man go crazy. "Alvina Miller, where is your discretion?" The two of them were lying on the table, teasing and chatting. "Is this the thing you should do?" The man suddenly leaned forward, and at that moment, Alvina Miller's face was so close to his chest. Unfortunately, her hands were still holding a few books, causing her chest to hurt. "It hurts." Alvina Miller ignored his question, and pitifully cried out. Joseph Grant really wanted her to suffer, but with her frowning face, her long arms directly took away all the books in her arms. Alvina Miller, who was a pitiful little kitten a moment ago, instantly turned into a cunning little fox. Her watery eyes flashed with a smile, and he boldly looked into the man's eyes and asked, "Joseph Grant, you still love me dearly, right? If I catch you and another man getting close, you will know other punishments." The handsome man's face suddenly flushed red. He took 2 steps back, breaking her free from his encirclement, then turned around, pretending to organize the books he had taken out. However, Alvina Miller acted like an immortal cockroach as he continued to test the waters. "You made me carry such a heavy book just now, so you were punishing me. Your punishment is so strange. Otherwise, what kind of punishment do you want?" Joseph Grant realized that he was actually no match for this woman. In terms of eloquence and courage, he seemed to be inferior to her by a bit. It was strange. He was a man. How could he lose to her? I've seen men jealous behavior on TV. They usually put women on the wall and kiss them first, followed by all sorts of warnings and threats. Your imagination is really rich. Joseph Grant was practically amused by her words. Your imagination is too poor. Alvina Miller crossed her arms in front of her chest and leaned against the bookshelf, a pair of beautiful eyes looking at the man's tall and muscular back. Joseph Grant had the illusion that he was being played with by this woman. He put down the book, turned around, and met her beautiful eyes that were filled with love. Did you ask me to come here just to hear my explanation about working with male colleagues? I've finished explaining it. It's not as bad as you think. It's really just a job." Being stared at by the man's deep eyes, Alvina Miller immediately withdrew her frivolous gaze and became serious. "Are you expecting that kind of punishment?" The man's voice suddenly became deep and seductive. "What kind?" Alvina Miller instantly lost her memory. The man forced her to the bookshelf with his tall body. Alvina Miller was originally leaning on the bookshelf, but after being frightened by him, she was immediately stuck onto the bookshelf, and the 2 small hands around his chest subconsciously rested at his side. Her pair of beautiful eyes flashed in panic, Hey, Joseph Grant, I was just joking with you. Remember, I don't like any jokes. With one hand, the man propped her up by her side, and with the other hand, he forcefully lifted up her beautiful chin. His thin lips instantly burned up her sweetness. Alvina Miller's body trembled. A burst of electric current struck her heart, causing her brain to be drained of blood in an instant. In Joseph Grant's mind, he remembered how she stooped down to the table and spoke to the man with a smile. When he kissed her lips, they were instantly stained with anger, and he became even more wild and cold. Alvina Miller's mind was a complete blank. Her chest was also swollen from the soreness, and an unfamiliar feeling was surging back and forth within his body. She stretched out his two small hands, and instinctively wanted to grab onto something, but in the end, she grabbed onto the man's clothes. Enough. Let's go home tonight. No matter how bold Alvina Miller was, she couldn't possibly do such a private thing in a work area. Hence, her breath became erratic, and he resisted him with a low voice. The man laughed out loud. Who is it that refused to let go? Alvina Miller's body trembled. Only now did she realize that the man had already retracted the big palm under her chin, while her two small hands were still tightly grabbing onto the other party's clothes, not wanting to let go at all. She looked embarrassed and quickly let go of his hand and gave him a hard shove. Didn't you say we had to keep a distance? If others see. Don't worry. This library is my territory. There won't be anyone who would want to see it. The man gently straightened her collar that had been messed up by him. His voice was gentle as he comforted her. Really? Then I am relieved. As Alvina Miller said that, her fingers quickly pinched the man's handsome face. In terms of the ability to hit, Alvina Miller would definitely not admit defeat. The girl's warm and fragrant finger reached out from his nose, causing the man's heart and soul to tremble. Only when he felt pain on his face did he realize that this woman had done something bad once again. I wanted to pinch you like this for a long time, Alvina Miller said while beaming. You're so dishonest. Joseph Grant had really never seen a girl like her before. Alvina Miller shrugged his shoulders. I never said I was an honest person. You can go to work. I'll leave after reading some books. Joseph Grant's mood was already much better, so naturally he had to let her go. I want to stay with you a little longer. Alvina Miller lowered her head, and her feet drew circles on the ground. The corner of Joseph Grant's lips curled up into a smile, and his gaze inadvertently glanced at the rose brooch on her chest clothes. His finger gently touched it. It seems that you like it a lot. At the mention of this, Alvina Miller became angry again. Raising her head, she glared at him. Why did you give me this? Don't you like it? Joseph Grant's handsome face suddenly tensed up. It's quite pretty. I like it. Alvina Miller spoke the truth. Next time, I'll pick something else to give you. If you like something, you can tell me. Joseph Grant really didn't know a thing about girls. I like it. You, give it to me. Alvina Miller playfully stuck out her tongue. Chapter 1300. Selling was successful. The girl deliberately dragged her tone as she looked at the man's rapidly changing handsome face with a pair of beautiful eyes brimming with a smile. Joseph Grant knew that she had started to become naughty again, and looked at her seriously. Go back to work. I might not be going over for the next 2 days. Take care of yourself. How boring. Alvina Miller pouted. This interesting soul. How could he encounter Joseph Grant, this kind of 10,000-year-old ice mountain? Forget it. She would make his calm heart boil sooner or later. Even though Joseph Grant had a strict expression, just as she was about to turn around and leave, he gently patted her head to comfort her. Alvina Miller walked out of the library unwillingly. She realized that the library was really deserted. This world was too boring. There were not many people who could calm down and read books. Could Joseph Grant be considered a strange person? Alvina Miller couldn't help laughing as she thought of using this word to describe him. Darkness descended, enveloping the financial city. Standing at the highest point, one could see a bustling scene. However, behind the bustling city, there were countless conspiracies and secrets. You mean to say that you want to find a man to seduce Miss Miller's family? A court official looked at old President, who was sitting on the sofa and drinking tea, with a surprised expression on his face. Secondly, it could also divert the focus of Joseph Grant's attention. Perhaps he did not love this woman, but since the two families had the intention to let them marry, he could not just watch his future wife show love to another man. This was a man's pride, and Joseph Grant was a proud and conceited man, so it was even more impossible for such a thing to happen to him. Old President said thoughtfully. That's right, no man would want to see their girlfriend be together with another man. Joseph Grant would definitely argue against Alvina Miller and get her into trouble. The official immediately revealed a smug smile. Let's do it this way. Since there can't be any more open injuries, these underhanded tricks can be played. Sometimes, a small scheme can cause huge waves as well. Old President felt a tinge of satisfaction at being able to come up with such a good plan. Then the person that we chose must be handsome and must have a good appearance. Also, he must be someone from our office, so that we can get close to Alvina Miller. Furthermore, this man must know how to please women, and it would be best if he is an expert in love. The minister immediately decided to go in search of the right man. You go take charge of this. All women like good-looking men. Although Joseph Grant also looks handsome, it's a pity that his personality is definitely not to be liked by women. It's too calm, too proud and aloof. Old President evaluated this young opponent of his. Yes, Joseph Grant has a good appearance, but he doesn't have the humor of a man. If a woman only values looks good, then that's fine, but the things a woman demands are not small at all. Power and fame are not a problem, but if a man that we interact with every day can have a sense of humor, then life can be considered more sweet. The minister also smiled as he expressed his insights. You missed something. What women value is perhaps a man's sense of responsibility. This time, you have to pick someone with a sense of responsibility. Although this is just a play, it should make him act a little more lifelike. Don't disappoint me. Old President particularly emphasized one point. We've already investigated this Alvina Miller before. Since she was young, she has always been a girl who has his own rule, so we don't know what kind of man she would like. Right now, we can't interact much with her, but it seems like she doesn't like Joseph Grant. The minister also frowned, indicating that this was a difficult problem. Usually an outstanding woman would like those men who make her happy to make her smile, but the more they love each other, the more deeply they love each other. Since Alvina Miller is a girl with his own rule, then I will find a lively and cheerful young man to get along with her. Old President had lived for a long time, but he didn't really understand women's hearts. It was said that women's hearts were like needles on the seabed. This was definitely the truth. Sir, don't worry. It seems that I already have a good candidate. I'll look for him in a while. He'll definitely fulfill your wish." The minister confidently accepted this mission and left. Old President looked out the window at the dark and cold night, holding onto his skinny fingers. A look of determination flashed across his face. The older the better. He did not believe that he had lived to the end, but he still could not defeat a youngster. After the minister left the presidential palace, he headed straight for his ideal candidate. Inside a simple suite, Minister Barry Smith sat on the sofa. Opposite him was a nervous young man who was at a loss on what to do. "Minister Smith is here late at night. I wonder what business do you have with me?" This young man's name was Benson. He was a young and outstanding diplomat in the office, and the minister Barry Smith sat in front of him was not his direct superior, but rather an officer that was several ranks higher. Worship was written on the young man's face, and he was flattered. "Benson, remember the last time you were reprimanded by the Mr. Vice President in front of everyone due to a diplomatic error? After that, your fighting spirit became a lot weaker, you must be sad." Barry Smith had a professional-like smile on his face, with his tolerance and benevolence towards youngsters. When Benson mentioned the sad old story, he lowered his head and did not speak, but his expression had already revealed his grievance. "Then do you want to rekindle your fighting spirit and continue to fight for your dreams?" Barry Smith had a good method of distribution as he asked him with a smile. "Minister Smith, thank you for your concern. Actually, I know that I have shortcomings, and will definitely work even harder in the future." Of course, Benson would not easily give up his dream. "Now, I have a chance. I wonder if you're willing to cherish it." Barry Smith stared at the expression on his face, looking at the minute changes in his expression to see what he was thinking. Benson's face lit up. Obviously he valued this opportunity greatly. "What does Minister Smith mean by this? Could it be that there is an important task for me to take care of?" Benson was originally a smart person, but this was already a clear hint. Of course he wouldn't pretend to be stupid. "Actually, I did not come here personally to find you. Instead, I came here for the president, hoping that someone would step forward and take on the heavy responsibility in the face of danger. Under his leadership, we will have an even more glorious future." Barry Smith was still smiling, but his words were filled with energy and encouragement. Benson's face became even more excited, as if he could really carry out a very important mission. "Minister Smith, if there's anything you want to say, just say it. I am extremely willing to serve the president." Benson hurriedly expressed his loyalty. "All right, with your words, we are relieved. Actually, this mission is not a national matter. I just hope that you can make a woman fall in love with you." Barry Smith restrained his expression and said seriously. Benson looked dazed. "Remember, this woman is not some other person, but a woman who will become Joseph Grant's wife in the future. Her name is Alvina Miller and she is currently working in the archives." Benson's entire body trembled. He obviously did not expect that he would get such a mission. "When Joseph Grant reprimanded you back then, you should have harbored hatred towards him as well. Are you willing to fight for your dreams and get humiliated by him in public?" Barry Smith purposely filled oil with vinegar and made things difficult for Joseph Grant, just to stir up the hatred in his heart towards Joseph Grant. "Minister Smith, how can I be willing? I lost at the starting line and Joseph Grant's name was at the finishing line the moment he was born. I don't believe that he won't make a mistake because he only earned his name by borrowing the glory of his family." Sure enough, the hatred in Benson's heart was triggered, and he clenched his fists. gnashing his teeth in hatred. "So, you promised to seduce this woman?" Minister Smith was satisfied. "Minister Smith, the problem is that I'm afraid my conditions are not good enough. I can't let that woman have a good impression of me," Benson said with an unconfident expression. "No, you're already outstanding. Your appearance is handsome, and you are born with a face that is satisfactory to women. I trust you. Now you should go." Barry Smith was extremely confident in him.